just going to share my screen and is it visible?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Thank you, Director General Chatsek Werapat, all colleagues participating online Zoom meeting. And today we are, as you know, that we are celebrating the day on loss and waste of food, which is basically the 27th, 29th of September. But as Hurain Jannat mentioned that today is 27th and we are celebrating it. So it's a very important topic, and especially I would mention that in the context of SDGs, it is binding on all the member countries who are signatories to the SDGs that food should be protected and it should be preserved and the wastage and losses should be reduced. So today, the sequence of my presentation, which I will be following, is that what is food loss and waste. Then I will dilate upon the estimates in different regions and countries that how food is lost and wasted. Then estimates of the United States of America, because it's a developed country, but still there are a lot of wastages of food. Then the relevancy of wastage and losses with SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, I will touch upon that as well. And then the loss and waste in food value chain, right from the production to the consumption, like from field to fork, that what are the stages and wherein we can reduce these losses and wastages, which could be available to the future generations and for time when there is scarcity of food. Then I will also dilate upon the comparison of countries on the basis of food waste and loss, and then what should be the control approaches to reduce these losses. So first of all, as I mentioned that Food Loss and Waste Day is observed by Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN and United Nations Environmental Protection Agency jointly on 29 September every year for the purpose to create awareness at all levels about the importance of food loss and waste. So basically, as I mentioned, that it has been mentioned in the Sustainable Development Goal and target of SDG 12.3 specifically pertains to this aspect of loss and waste. It has been estimated that there are huge losses of food globally, around 13% of the food which is produced, and between the harvest and retail together, it's about 17% at household level, food services and retail. So if we look into these figures, the losses are very high, and we are supposed to create awareness amongst the stakeholders, right from producers to the consumers, that what are the stages and how we can reduce these losses and wastages. As I mentioned that in the United States, a huge amount of food is wasted, and that is about 40% of all food in the United States. And 25% of fresh water we consume goes to produce food we never eat. So it is very alarming that, as we know, that there is scarcity of water, and most of the countries are facing the drought conditions like the South Africa and nearby countries, and mostly in other countries, because the weather patterns have been changed. There are challenges of climate change, and the weather patterns have totally been changed, and there are long droughts conditions. So the food we produce, because it consumes water, but the food which is wasted had already consumed 25% of water, which is not being consumed by the human being. And 4% of oil we consume goes to produce food we never eat. So we know that most of the machines which are used for cultivation of the fields consume oil. And then to make value addition of that, it also run on the oil and petroleums. So 4% of our oil is used to produce that food which we never eat. So it is very alarming that a natural resource is spent and a huge amount is spent, but still the food produced is not available to the human beings. So estimatedly about $166 billion retail value of preventable waste is spent on the food we never eat. So it is a huge amount, and with this amount we can go for investment in other productive projects and in other productive activities. But rather, the food which is wasted, if that could be preserved and it could be used efficiently and properly, so we can make a saving of about $166 billion. As I mentioned, about 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted every year. That is very alarming and it's a very huge amount. And 2 billion people go hungry or unnourished. Because in SDG 1, food security is the basic item that no one is supposed to go hungry. But if such a huge amount of food is wasted, then definitely the people will go hungry to bed. And for that matter, we as members of the SDGs all are supposed to have this responsibility to reduce the wastages, and the food which is wasted could be made available to the people who are in need of it, and they go hungry to their beds. And about 7 to 10 million tons of food is wasted annually in UK. In United Kingdom, this huge amount of food is wasted, and it is thought that about 50% is still edible. And the wasted food, which is wasted, is about out of that 50% can still be consumed for eating purposes. Estimate shows that the food lost cost about 700 pounds per year per family. If we look into it, like in most of the uh, less developed countries or developing countries, the per day income of the people is less than $1. So if in UK and other developed countries, such huge amount of food is wasted, we can make it available to the poor nations so that they can have a better and good quality of food to eat, because we are also facing the challenges of health, similarly the maternity health. All these are issues are addressed in the SDGs. So keeping into the importance of food, it leads to SDGs, and it is important issue and should work on it collectively as responsible nations. Now coming to SDGs 12, response, consumption, and reduction. And 12.3 says that by 2030, half per capita global food waste at the retail and consumers level have to be reduced, and food losses along production and supply chain, including post-harvest losses. We know that the farmers don't know that how to take the crop from their fields or the grains which they are harvesting. So they are unaware of the pre-harvest and post-harvest management of the crops, and ultimately huge losses are being reported in different countries. Now coming to food loss along the entire value chain, if we look into the entire value chain, what are the stages and how this food is wasted. So at the production level during or immediately after harvest on the farm. As I mentioned that the people don't know, the farmers don't know that what is the right time for harvesting of their crop and what should be the moisture content in the grains so that it couldn't shed. Because if there is over maturity and the desired level of moisture is lost, then they will be facing problem in the shedding of their cobs and the spikes, especially in the cereal crops, and similarly in the vegetables and fruits, because they get over ripened by getting more heat and having less shelf life. So it is very important that the farmers should be educated and they should know that what is the right time for harvesting and picking of their fruits and vegetables or harvesting of their crops. So the moisture content and the shedding issue, they should be taken into consideration. And for that matter, I think the agriculture extension people of different countries and the researchers are supposed to conduct research that what is the desirable quantity of moisture, like presently 8 to 10% of moisture is supposed to be at the harvesting time. Then handling and storage. After leaving the farm to handling, storage, and transport, because we know that most of the quantum of the grains that is wasted while we are transporting the grains from one place to another place, because we are not having the proper mechanism and proper management practices of the carriage industry. So it also needs to be improved in the storages, because sometimes the insect mistakes are there, sometimes the fumigation is not being carried out, and ultimately different diseases, fungal diseases, they get erupted in the grains, and ultimately that is wasted. So for that matter, the storage is very important, and it needs to be properly automated to determine the required humidity and the required temperature, so that the grain cannot be damaged either through the insect pest infestation, or it may get the fungal uh, um, attacks. Now coming to the processing and packaging during industrial or domestic processing and packaging, it is also very important, because sometimes packaging or the processing line is not of the high quality, and it get contaminate the food and the other value-added products which is being processed, like Clostridium botulinum in case of the dairy products. Similarly, sometimes they are not properly cleaned. The processing lines are not properly cleaned and maintained. So ultimately, it leads to different contaminations, and these contamination leads to the wastage and the loss of food. Now coming to the distribution and marketing, you see in this slide, like the fresh fruits and vegetables are there, uh, but they need that it should be. So the fresh fruit and vegetable, they also need to be properly kept in the shelves and properly served, because most of the farmers in the developing countries, they don't go for grading and sorting of the rotten fruit or overripened, and ultimately the rotten fruits and vegetable get infect the other fruits and vegetables as well. So I think at the field level, then at the processing level, there should be a mechanism that proper grading and packaging should be practiced, in the off type of the fruits and vegetables should be segregated and separated from the fresh fruits and vegetable, and the food which is being offered for sale at the stores, that should be properly hygienic and properly treated. It is also very important, and Sarsek Varapat Director General is also cognizant of this issue, that in most of the developing countries, the farmers are using excessive pesticides on their fruits and vegetables, which are having high MRL value, and ultimately by consuming those fruits and vegetables, it leads to cancer and different other diseases. So I think the farmer also need that they should either produce the organic products, or if it is not possible, then the safe use of pesticides and fertilizers should be carried out, and having less MRL value. So I think it is also very important that pre-cooling of the fruits and vegetable at farm level, and then it is grading and sorting at the processing level, and then offering to the consumer, that should be practiced in the value chain. And coming to consumption, in the home or business of the consumer, including restaurants and cafes, you know that sometimes we put an order for more food, and ultimately we can't consume that too much food, and we go for wastage of the leftovers. So I think keeping in view the importance of food, and having the cognizance of the hungry people throughout the world, I think we should be quite optimistic that the food should not be wasted, and we should take into consideration the poor nations and the poor people across the world. Now, food loss and waste occurs more near the folk in developed regions and more at the farm level in developing regions. So it is very important, like the developed countries, people are having more purchasing power and they are economically very good as compared to the developing nations. Uh, so here it has been observed, and I have written the source of this report, like at the production level, the less developed countries are making more wastage, as I mentioned, that nor the farmers are properly educated, nor they know the handling of their crops, and nor they know about the proper moisture content and the proper time of harvesting of their fruits and vegetables or crops. So ultimately, the losses at the field level is very high. Then at the storage level, it's also very high. But if we look into the consumption side, uh, it's very high in the developed nations because they have the purchasing powers to buy more food, but ultimately the consumption that is less. And beyond their consumption, they put orders to the restaurants or to or get more food from the retail stores. And ultimately, they get wasted, and they not only waste their food but also waste their it shows that mostly in the North America and the Oceania, the production losses are 17%, handling and storage that is 6%, and then the processing is about 9%, and distribution is 7%, and consumption is 61%. So if we look into this bar, the first bar, it shows that the at the consumption level it's 61%. So it's very high. Now coming to the last two bars, which depicts the South and South Asia, Southeast Asia, and then the Sub-Saharan Africa. Here, the losses at the production level, as I mentioned at the earlier side, that they don't know about the management of their crops, nor they know the pre-harvest and post-harvest management. So ultimately, the losses at the production and field level, they are high as compared to the consumption level. And at consumption level, it might be the reason that they're having less powers to purchase it, probably not getting more food to buy because the per capita income is low and most of the countries, uh, even most of the people are living below the poverty line. So here we can focus in the developing nations like the Southeast Asia and South Asia, and then the African continents on the field level and production level, so that the uh, losses could be reduced. But in the developed nations, at the consumption level, the losses are very high, and they should be properly trained and they should be properly educated. That keeping in view the varieties of food and the nutritional aspects of food, what they are supposed to take as per their body requirements and what is not needed. So I think this way, through awareness campaigns and through proper education, we can educate the people to go for conservation of food and should have less chances of waste and loss. Now, cereal compromise the most losses waste when measured by calories, while fruits and vegetable by weight. So this is pie graph, and it shows that the cereals losses are very high, and fruits and vegetable that is 13%. So the first circle indicates like 53% of cereal that is wasted. And now coming to the other circle, which shows the loss and waste by weight of fruits and vegetables. So it shows that about 1.3 billion tons of wastage has been reported, and different collectively and different items, which includes 19% in cereals, roots, about 20%, and 44% is in oil, seed, and pulses. So these slides basically depict you that either they are the cereal crops or either there's a fruits and vegetable. Huge losses are being reported, and basically needed for the human life, like they are providing the carbohydrates and the macronutrient and micronutrients which are necessary for your health. And if we could save the losses in these two categories of crops, I think most of the health issues can be addressed, and then the spending which is being carried out by different countries on health, that can be reduced if we go for conservation and for a reduction of these losses in these categories of crops. If we look into this slide, it also shows that, like for example, in China, uh, the if food loss and waste were its own country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emissions. So it also indicates like we are wasting our food. Ultimately, it leads to the emission of gases, which is a challenge to the climate change, because climate change is very alarming situation throughout the world. And if the greenhouse gases are produced through different means, like either that is the fuels burning or the brake lanes, which are using the tires and plastics, and then the wastage of food, it ultimately leads to gas emissions, and also having the chances to increase the temperature of the earth, and ultimately the glaciers are melted, and the floods and other havocs happens. So in different regions, it has been reported that the wastage of food and vegetables as well as other food crops, they leads to the production of methane gases, and ultimately they're the main causes of the greenhouse effect and phenomena. Now, reasons for food waste. Now coming to the reason, like there are many reasons which leads to food waste. Some of the most common items there they are wasted. Uh, First, the items has been discussed, like bread and bread products, how they are wasted. Like consumers don't understand best before dates and bread is thrown away while still edible. As I mentioned, that basically it's very important that the food items, either processed or unprocessed, they should have the uh, proper dates of expiry. Sometimes there is still time that the food is not going to expire, because it is having the time, but the more affluent class and the people who can afford just get uh, a little of that food uh, from the box or from the any container which is having that the package. But the rest of the food which is still uh, we can consume, that is edible, that is thrown and wasted. The bread has been stored incorrectly and has dried out and gone hard. Sometimes it happens that we don't practice at household level the proper protection and conservation of the bread, and ultimately it get dry, and then it's not feasible to be consumed properly. So the management practices at household level is also very important, and for that matter, the women folk of the society need to be properly trained that if they have prepared food or bread, so it can be used for the next time. But if they practice proper storage mechanism and proper uh, management practices, the bread has been stored too long beyond best before that and has gone moldy. Sometimes we store the bread in such a way that the productive life has been expired and it has got the fungal development. fungus has been developed, and ultimately, if that fungal bread having the fungus, if it is consumed, leads to dysentery and other diseases. So I think we should be cognizant of this issue, that the food which is left and is still having a good time, that should be consumed properly and hygienically. And if the food which has been expired or has developed fungal sort of molds, that should be avoided. Now, coming to fruits and vegetable, consumers don't store the produce correctly. As I mentioned, that you might be aware of the fact, like the banana get perished very early, and if it could be properly managed and properly placed in the refrigerators by covering it in the uh, papers, I think we can prolong the shelf life of the banana. Similarly, the other fruits, if they could be properly placed in the refrigerators, or if they could be dried, this way we can increase the shelf life of both that produce and we can consume it. And for that matter, I think the process industry in different country needs to developed, like in India, dates they are properly processed, then chuara is made, and then chuara is used, which is a dry type of date, and it is used for longer period of time. So they have increased the shelf life of date through heating up in water, and then similarly, the other fruits and vegetables, we can go for canning, or we can go for other value-added products like making jellies, jams, marmalades, and through different ways, and by adding additives and some sort of chemicals which can lead to increase the shelf life. So I think uh, canning and processing industry is also very important. Sometimes the large pack size or multi buys encourage consumers to buy more than they need. As I mentioned, that sometimes the people are quite affluent, and they're having the purchasing powers to buy more than their consumption. So ultimately, the food which they need, that is consumed, but the leftover is wasted. So I think the family size and the consumer should look into their need, and according to their need, they should get food purchased from the stores. Consumers are not aware of the benefits of some packaging extending the shelf life of the products. As I mentioned, that packaging is very important. And then for the processing industry is also very imperative that they should have proper labeling and expiry dates, so that the people get aware of the fact that for how long they can use that product. Beside that, I would mention that especially in the agriculture products, uh, the fruit and vegetable absorb a lot of heat in the field. So when during picking, they are collected and then packed collectively, due to the heat they have absorbed in the field, they get perished. So for that matter, most of the farmers are unaware of the pre-cooling mechanism, like some of the fields are having proper cooling chambers, and they have ponds, just not only to wash the fruits and vegetables, to get it clear from the pesticides and the dust, which through winds or different means have been deposited on the fruits. So this way, not only the cleaning process being carried out by washing the fruits and vegetable, and then keeping in the cooling chambers at the field level. Like for example, for that matter, we can go through cooperative farming. Like some farmers in the developing nations, they are quite small, having small land holding. We can encourage the entrepreneurs to establish a cooling chamber or the washing facility in the nearby vicinity, so that the people can take their produce there to wash it, to grade it, and properly place it in the cooling chamber if the prices are less in the market. So they can dispose of their product when the prices are reasonable and manageable, if they like that. And this way they can increase the shelf life, and even it can be transported to the rest of the destinations within the country or to abroad. So I think the value chain development concept as we are focusing. So I think this way, not only we can make awareness in the producers, but the consumers can also be educated that how they are supposed to pick the extra food which they get it from the market or they buy. Starchy foods. Now coming to starchy food, like consumers cook too much. Example: pasta, rice, portion size too big, and leftovers are thrown away. Mostly in our Asian countries like India, Pakistan, the people sometimes preparing more food than their demand. So ultimately, the leftover that is wasted and it is not being consumed by them. Sorry, I'm having a sore throat today, so uh, I apologize for that. So reasons for food waste: meat, chicken, and fish. Consumers buy too much in advance. Sometimes they are of the concept, like of the perception that probably the meat, chicken will not be available. Uh, so they go for bulk purchase. And in bulk purchase, sometime in most of our developing countries, the prices go high because due to bulk purchase, it leads to shortage of food and the prices go high. And ultimately, the consumers are supposed to be cognizant of this issue that they should not create a shortage of food in the market and the other people should not suffer due to their bulk purchase. Food goes off before cooking due to so sometimes if the cooking has not been made by the women folk in a proper way, so the kids and the family members also sometimes left over their food and then ultimately they go for purchasing the junk foods like the from the restaurants or from other places. So I think the at school level, especially for the females in the South Asian countries, we can educate the female uh, or even the males who are like the working families, both male female, they are engaged somewhere in their jobs. They can be trained that how they are supposed to make their foods properly so that is very also important and they should know that what sort of mechanism they should adopt to reduce the chances of wastage. Fizzy drinks, the fizz is lost when bottles are opened a few times. Larger bottles can be cheaper than small one because you know that sometimes, especially in the soft drinks, we get uh, large bottles, and once that bottle is opened, the rest we consume it a little bit, but the leftover that is wasted, and because it's not having that much of the gaseous component which we call fizz, and the fizz is lost, and ultimately the people avoid drinking that soft drink. Milk can go off if stored incorrectly. Too much milk is stored with cereals or in drinks. So milk wastage is also being noticed. And if we are having sufficient amount of milk, we can get yogurt, we can get like the cheese and even butter and other products, value-added products. So I think milk should also be taken into consideration in most of the rural economies. They are based on livestock and dairy. So dairy products that need to be properly taken care of. And value-added products, like as I mentioned, they need to be developed and the milk wastage should be reduced. And ultimately, it will lead to the more income to the farm family, which can be invested which can be invested on the education of their kids or even in health facilities or other needs. Now, reducing the amount of food consumers waste not only is financial benefits but also environmental benefits. As I mentioned, that because they waste more money on huge chunk of food which is not being consumed, so ultimately they're at loser end, and the food which is wasted, that is thrown away, and ultimately leads to methane gas and other uh, serves as a feeding area for the insects and other injurious type of mosquitoes, etc. And the odor smell in the environment. So ultimately, it has a negative connotation on the environment, and ultimately the consumer who buys it a large amount, he's at loser end and waste his money, and also responsible for contamination of the environment. When food waste goes to landfill, it rots, and during the process, methane gas is produced. Methane is a greenhouse gas and contributes to global warming. Uh, it was earlier mentioned that methane is basically uh, the main contributor to global warming, and the emissions from the food contamination, that is very high. Consumers should use food waste bins whenever possible. So it is very necessary that even have a little better amount of food that is wasted, that should be properly disposed of, and it should not be left open either to serve as the harboring area for the mosquitoes and for other insects, which leads to biting of the human beings and animals. And sometimes even the vectors leads to the uh, dissemination and the spread of diseases, especially in case of zoonotic diseases from human beings to animals and animals to human beings. So this should be avoided. Reducing waste is a priority for both the economy and environment. The UK is making progress, but still has a long way to go. So this is the phenomena, like most of the developing countries, UK, US, they are making investment. And you might be aware of the fact that in 2008-9 in America, the livestock farmers started agitation that they were not getting corn for their feed, for their animal feeds, livestock feed, because it was converted into meat, into ethanol. Ethanol is a biofuel. So they were supposed to take care of their livestock. So ultimately, the USDA conducted research and they introduced some other crops like mescanthus grass, and um, which was a substitute of the corn, and that was used for the biofuels. And the livestock feed was conserved so that it can be fed to the livestock in the dry season, properly chopped, and silage was made. Ethically, it is challenging too. Despite the amount of food wasted, there are an increasing number of people who are in food poverty and rely on food banks. So we know that, especially in most of the development countries, we are hosting, Myanmar is hosting uh, a number of refugees, and the nearby countries, Bangladesh is harboring and giving protection to the refugees from Myanmar. Similarly, Pakistan is giving refuge to the war refugees, and even Iran. So we are facing all these problems. So the ethically, we are all are responsible to take care of the poor nations and who are in distress. So I think the food which we are wasting, that can be saved in terms of money, or in terms of the generous contribution to all these nations, so that it can be properly utilized, and their need can be taken care of. Reducing food and waste. There are many ways in which consumers can help reduce food waste when buying food, eating out, and eating at home. Uh, Common causes of food waste when shopping includes buying multi-packs items that may not get used, share the cost and goods with a friend, family, impulse shopping, or write a list and stick to it. Tempting offers work out if they really are good deals. Uh, then confusion or date labelings, be familiar with what they mean, choose the food with longest date. So all these are the means that how we can go for reduction of food waste, like we should not go for huge or bulk purchase. We should stick to the needs and not only like choice lists we have got from the from anybody, and we should stick to it to buy it. But we should take into consideration our need. So I think overspending should be avoided, and only the need should be taken care of. And if we can afford and we can spend more money on the purchase of the consumable items, I think it could be spent in a generous way by making contribution into a philanthropic activity which is taking care of the food which is given to the orphans and the poor widows and the refugees. Common causes of food waste when preparing and cooking food at home include no forward planning, plans meals in advance and make a list. Like uh, it is very important that for every work we should have a proper planning. Like the household should decide that what is the weekly plan for preparing food in the lunch and dinners. So I think sometimes we bring a number of food items and then ultimately we don't follow the plan, or even we stick to our choices. Like, for example, some of the kids might not be in habit of taking the pulses or taking vegetables. So, but for health purposes, I think we should at school level and even at household level make a proper education regarding the consumption of foods, and it is very important for the health of the kids and even for the health of the families that they should have proper planning and no haphazard purchases of the meals. Cooking too much. Use portion guides and calculator when cooking. We don't know that what is the requirement of our body and what sort of calories we are in need of, but just we go for cooking and ultimately uh, we cook too much and we consume a little bit, but the most of portion of our food that is wasted. So I think if we are talking of the hygiene and we are talking of the energy and calories, so we should be cognizant of uh, all these things. Limited cooking skills, get to know recipes that can be modified to use food that you have available. As I mentioned, that sometimes the food we cook at home that is wasted because it's not as up to the taste of the consumer. So I think we should use proper recipes so that it can be more palatable and more attractive to the consumer so that he can enjoy it and the food is not wasted. Leftover food is not used. Be creative with leftovers food to save waste and money. It is very important because sometimes the breads and the the vegetables or any food that has been prepared at home or we buy it from market, uh, use use a little bit of that. But if the leftovers are uh, there, they are thrown away, and ultimately we mentioned that it leads to harboring the mosquitoes. And if that could be properly stored and we can use it to the next time, because this way we can not only save our savings and finances, but also can um, avoid the wastage of food. Food is stored incorrectly. Make sure perishable food is stored at the correct temperature. Make good use of the freezers because freezers uh, enhances the shelf life. So that should be properly cleaned and on interval basis. If there is food which is near to waste, that should be uh, used and that should be disposed of, and then that should be properly kept clean, and the food which is perishable, that should be properly maintained at a proper temperature and humidity. So I think this way, at household level, we can reduce the food losses, and we can contribute to the water which is being used on that food, and we can contribute the money which has been spent on that, or the uh, inputs that has been used. We another way contribute to the economy of our nation by stemming the food losses. Using leftovers for many reasons, including social, financial, and environmental, it makes sense to make the most of the food we grow, buy, and cook. This includes using leftovers smartly. Leftover ingredients can be used to create an exciting range of dishes and not just sandwiches with the cold meat left over from Sunday roast. However, it is important to remember that leftovers should be stored correctly, and unless they have been frozen and used within 48 hours of when they were made, rice dishes should be eaten within 24 hours. So it's all talking about the leftovers, that we should smartly and properly utilize the leftovers, and we should not waste them, but rather not only sandwiches can be made, but other ways through by addition of some spices or mixing it with other fresh vegetables, we can use it for our lunches and for our dinners. Now, top tips are here. Deliberately create leftovers, cook extra vegetables, and make a soup for lunch later in the week. Sometimes, if you are short of time and you make more food, then it should be used for the second time. Make double the quantity of your evening meal and take the rest for the lunch next day. Like, for example, if you are the working couple going to your offices or to your workplaces, so if you have made more food in the evening of the last night, that could be taken as a lunch, which can be consumed in your office and workplaces. Don't throw away stale bread, which is the food processors to make uh, crumbs, and freeze. Make a summer pudding with seasonal soft food. Spray with oil, rub with garlic, cover with tin foil, and bake a delicious homemade garlic bread. So these are the practices, and through breadcrumbs that can be spread on even making the meat products, like the uh, Indians and Bangladesh people might know the kebabs and the Shami kebabs. So they are also having these bread crumbs with a little bit addition of oil, olive oil or garlic, and that can be used even in the restaurants and even at homes. So the crux of the whole uh, wastage and uh, loss control is that we are supposed to reduce the losses, and we should make sure that the extra finances, extra natural resources which are spent, that should not be wasted, but rather we should efficiently utilize them. Make extra rice or pasta and make a salad for your lunchbox. Same for the first point, freeze unused uh, grapes, pita, and sliced breads. If eggs are nearing their dates, separate and freeze. Freeze tubs of baking fat to prevent it going off before you next want to bake. So these are the practices for different items, and uh, the, the whole focus is that the wastage should be reduced, and for that wastage, different practices and for different products, we are supposed to follow a proper way. uh, Now, coming to the think ingredients not leftover, barriers can be created with leftover cooked rice, meat, and vegetables, top off with sour cream and salsa. So, uh, from pasta or cooked vegetables into frittata. These are basically the products which are being prepared of these cooked vegetables, blend cooked vegetables with a can of whole tomatoes and create a delicious sauce for pasta. Name two other ways you could use leftover. Consider using what you can had for dinner last night. So these are basically everybody is supposed to think that how he can utilize the leftovers for the next lunch or for dinner, and with what addition he can make it more delicious and more uh, palatable, and so that the family and he can enjoy it. Why not have look your fridge and freezer at home and have eat fridge eat the fridge night? Like it means that we are supposed to look into our freezers and refrigerators that if it is having any fruit and vegetable or cooked food which is near to be wasted, that can be utilized in this way. You will not only be in a position to reduce the losses of our finances, but also we will be in a better position to utilize that food. Take a photograph of what you have made and show your class next lessons. It can be used for the class people. Like, for example, we can encourage the students and can tell them that, for example, he was studying last night and what food he has used and consumed, and then he is supposed to make a sort of showing a sort of competition can be arranged that, like, for example, he is doing well and he is very smart in utilizing the leftover food. So, for food preservation and food wastages can be reduced by adoption of healthier, more sustainable diet. Buy only what we need. Pick ugly fruits and vegetables, like, for example, if they are too ugly and not able to be consumed, that should be sorted out, and then we should use the other food wisely and store it properly. Understand food labeling, start small and go on leftovers. These are some of the suggestions we can introduce. Put our food waste to use, respect our food, support local food producers, keep fish population afloat. We know that marine life is also a very big contributor uh, to be a part of our food, and it's basically nutritious. That most of the countries are using fish very frequently, like Bangladesh, Japan, Philippines, and Asian countries. They're good consumers of the fish. So I think the restocking of the streams and water bodies, that is very important. And for that matter, sometimes there are challenges of like mixing of the pesticides when the farmers are spraying pesticides on their crops. That water leads to be drained out into the freshwater streams, and it's always a challenge. So I think the fish rearing and fish management practices should also be shown to the farmers, and they should be encouraged that because it's making a huge portion of our diet. Use less water by this means that as in the earlier start of my presentation, I mentioned that most of the countries, they are facing scarcity of water, and ultimately it's being a challenge that most of the countries will have the water stress. So uh, either that is the freshwater streams or groundwater, that should be efficiently utilized. And even in some of the countries, still we are having the flood irrigation systems for our crops. So I think we should stick to the smart irrigation and high efficiency irrigation systems, which include the sprinkler irrigation system and drip irrigation systems, keeping in view the crop water requirement of the crops, because the farmers doesn't know that what is the cropping cycle and what are the crop water requirements for different crops. So according to the crop water requirement, we should manage our irrigation schedules. So means that this way we can reduce the water losses, and that water which is being lost can be efficiently utilized for raising more crops. So this way we can increase the cropping intensity for crops from the land, and ultimately the return to farmers will be high, and even more crops will be produced. So this way, we can increase the production and yield of our crops, and more food can be ensured to be available to the nation. Keep our soils and water clean. We know that last time there was a webinar on the soil contamination and environmental pollution. So we know that plastic bags, they are quite prevalently used in different countries, and ultimately they don't get degraded. So the soil get polluted, or sometimes we are not judiciously using the soils. So soils are also facing the degradation issues like salinity, alkalinity, and waterlogging. So I think these are the issues they should be taken care of. And for that matter, if such like soils can be protected from such menaces, I think we can grow more crops, and we will be having good production. Eat more pulses and veggies. It is also very important for health point of view, even for good health, and which is also one of the SDG. We should have balance on diets, and we should properly utilize pulses and vegetables. Sharing is caring. The wasted food which is near to waste, that can be shared with other colleagues. So there are some slogans to which we can reduce the food waste. Say no to food waste. Food waste benefits no one. Think of the poor before you waste your food. Think twice before wasting food. Wasting food will not feed the hungry. Waste less, save more, live more. Be smart and say no to food waste. More food, share it. So these are some of the slogans, and we can adopt any of these, and the aim will be we can reduce the food wastages. So I'm sorry. These are the possible approaches for food waste, like in production, how we can reduce the losses, then handling and storages, how the gaps can be identified and they can be addressed, then processing and repacking and distribution and consumption. So these are the some of the points, like and production, provide more information at how to use unmarketable crops, uh, improve agriculture extension services, improve access to infrastructure in markets, and improve harvesting techniques. These are some of the points which at farm level we can introduce. And this way, the farmers can be educated by the extension people of any of the country, and they can reduce the losses. Handling and storages. After leaving the farm for handling and storages, we are supposed to improve storage techniques, uh, like evaporation, uh, storage bags, mm, silos. These are some of the practices we can introduce just to not leave the produce open, open to be infested by the insects or dehydrated. So I think I'm at the end of my presentation, and I'm sorry, today I'm having sore throat, and some of the points I couldn't explain it properly. So this is the supply from production to consumption, which indicate that there are different gaps, and those gaps can be filled properly. So slogan of waste management are the three R's, like reduce, reuse, and recycle. We should reduce our consumption, we should stick to the demand, and then we should reuse, and sometimes we can recycle some of the products and can be utilized properly. So this is all about my presentation of food loss and waste. And thank you very much for bearing me any suggestion, any point, or any question. So I will respond, will try to respond to your question, or if you want to advise me something. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Despite having the sore throats, you are giving a 1 hour presentation to us, which is commendable. We will not keep you more because as I am saying, you are actually really feeling bad. Uh, but still, as we have almost the 40 people with us, so if anyone, now I'm opening the floor for the discussion or comments or questions. I will not take much time as all of you know that our speaker is already feeling so. But if you have any questions or opinions or anything, okay, one hand raised, Mr. Mohammad Reza Mustafi. Okay, can you open your audio and ask what you want to ask, or Mr. Mohammad Reza Mustafi? Yes.
Yes. Hi, thanks very much for your good presentation. You mentioned about the loss and waste of cereals, about 19%, and also vegetables 45%. Do you have any comment or suggestion to reduce and decrease these losses and wastes in harvesting and post-harvesting?
Yeah, thank you very much for a very pertinent question. As I mentioned that for cereals, we are supposed to be aware of the proper time of harvest. Like sometime the spikes and the cobs or the fruits get over ripened, and ultimately when we go for its harvesting or for picking, it get lost and it's having less shelf life, and ultimately during picking at field level or even during transportation, it is wasted. So for that matter, I think we are supposed to properly educate the farmers that what are the pre-harvest management. Like, for example, if the bricks level of a fruit has been properly attained, then it's going to be ripened with next 24 hour or 48 hours, because sometimes they get properly packed in boxes and transported to various places. So during transportation within these 24 hours or 48 hours, they are able to be properly consumed. So this is one way. And as I mentioned, that in most of the cases, the pre-cooling practices are not being practiced at farm level. So I made a suggestion that for small farmers, they should be properly a linkage with entrepreneurs to have their proper cooling chambers near to the farm level, and pre-cooling tanks. Like, for example, when the fruits or vegetables are picked from the plants, they are supposed to wash it in the water tanks. And ultimately, once these are washed away, the dust is removed, the pesticides are removed, and ultimately they are shifted to the cooling chambers, which are having proper chambers, and then for 24 hours they are kept, so that the heat that has been gained during the field, that is lost, and ultimately it leads to increase your shelf life, and ultimately it can be transported to faraway destinations. So this way we can reduce the losses of fruits and vegetables. And for cereals, as I mentioned, the proper time of harvest needs to be identified, and it should not be over ripened, because sometimes the spikes of the cereals, if it get over ripened during harvesting, their sheds and most of the grains are lost at the farm level. So that should be taken care of. And then during transportation, if they are transported to stores, the stores should be properly managed, and they should have stacks for the bags, and there should be proper fumigation, and the infestation of pests should be avoided.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Sorry, one more. as far as you know, you mentioned about the harvesting technologies because we need to have a smart harvesting combines. For example, equip the combines with grain loss monitor, yield map and yield monitor to reduce and decrease the harvesting losses, to detect the combine harvesting during the season we are using the combines. I mean, using the technologies to reduce the harvesting notifications, for example, smart precision agriculture, something like that, and use these technologies to reduce the losses, especially in cereals. You mentioned pre-cooling for the vegetables. That's correct. That's good. But for cereals, we need to have a smart combine to reduce the losses and wastes.
Yeah, you are quite right, but I would mention that in some of the countries they have introduced the drone technology, and the drone carry out a proper survey, and they determine the temperature and the moisture content of even of the crops. And then you rightly mentioned that the combine harvesters that can be utilized for the big chunk of land, but in most of the countries the land holding is very small. So for that matter, we will be in use of the small reapers. So the combined harvester can have such like technology to determine the moisture content and before the harvesting of the field. But I have read in one of the paper like the drones have the capability to determine the agroecological cycles and give a full information to the farmers that when he is supposed to carry out his operations. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments about anything about our webinar? Please do so. If Sir, I wanted to ask you a question. Like in your first slide, first of the slide, you said that around 40% food is wasted in the USA, which is very interesting as USA is a developed country. So, sir, what do you think? What are the reasons behind it? What
actually, you have pointed out a very important point. As I mentioned, that mostly in the developed countries like US and UK, the people are quite affluent and they are having high purchasing powers. So they don't take care of their need, that what is their consumption need, but they buy more than their consumption. So the essence of the point is that at consumption level, their wastages are high. Although they are having high, good technology at the farm level processing, handling, the losses are very minimal. But at the consumption level, because they purchase more than their demand. So that is the reason that then that food is wasted.
So that means, sir, it's some kind of attitude, sir. Like they think they have money.
As I mentioned, that at school level, we are supposed to develop the behavior of the kids. Yeah.
Yes. So the food waste and loss is much more related with the behavior change or something like that, sir. And sir, another point I wanted to ask you, like you were saying that about the bulk purchasing of the consumer. Like in our country, in Bangladesh also, whenever we go to the market, we always tend to buy or purchase things as a bulk because we think that it reduced our cost. So it's again related to the attitude, sir.
Yes.
So what do you think about this? Like if
it's also very, very common in our country as well, like mostly the salaried class who get at the end of the month at their salaries and they go to the shopping malls and get a number of items having their choice list and collect each and everything. Ultimately, the demand for some items go high than the availability, and ultimately it leads to the price hike in some of the cases. So I think mostly in our region like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, we do have these sort of attitude since long, but I think keeping in view the importance of the food, we should only stick to the demand and to the taste. Rather, we sometimes purchase a number of items, but you might have observed that at the end of the month, some might not have been consumed. So
Yes.
I think this is very important that we should stick to our need.
So that means, sir, it's different between developed country and the least developed country, the attitude.
Yeah. Attitude is also an issue, but technology and awareness is also an important area, because we mentioned that in the developing countries, most of our losses are at the production level, like production, storage, handling, and transportation. These are the areas where our losses are very high, because we are lacking technology, we are not having the proper know-how. But there in the developed countries, the attitudinal issue is there, because they are having high purchasing power and they buy more food, and ultimately beyond their consumption, the food they have purchased, that is wasted. So that is the main difference.
Okay, sir, thank you. Sir, can you stop your sharing, your screen sharing?
Yeah.
Okay. So we still have some few minutes. If anyone wants to ask anything or opinion, if anyone wants to give to our speaker, it would be good. Or you can later you can directly send us to email if you want to ask anything to our speaker. Like he is right now, he's not in a good health. If not, okay, we will adjourn our webinar for today. Thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful presentation. So can you please send us your presentation so we can share it to our participants?
Sure.
Okay, and thank you all for joining. Thank you all. Look forward to seeing our next webinar. Hopefully in October, we will get the news of the webinar. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.